On a fog-drenched October night in 1993, a sheriff's cruiser was found idling on the shoulder of County Road 19. Engines still running, headlights cutting through a curtain of mist, and a child fast asleep in the back seat. The scene was so quiet, so perfectly still, that the first passerby thought it had to be a setup. But it wasn't. The vehicle, a standard-issue Ford Crown Vic, sat angled slightly toward the woods. Driver's door wide open, passenger side too. The radio crackled softly with static. No distress calls. No signs of a struggle. Inside, wrapped in a gray county-issued blanket, was 6-year-old Ben Teller, barefoot, wearing fire truck pajamas and curled up like he'd just drifted off during a late-night ride. He was unharmed, just asleep. But his parents, Deputy Mark Teller and Detective Aaron Teller, were gone. There was no blood, no broken glass, no shell casings. Mark's sidearm was still holstered. Aaron's was missing. The dashcam had stopped recording at 10:42 p.m. Its magnetic tape shredded like someone had torn it out by hand. The rear camera was manually turned off. There were no footprints in the wet grass, no tire tracks leading away. Just silence. The local sheriff arrived within minutes, stepping into the cold night air, flashlight trembling in his grip. He leaned into the cruiser, peered at the sleeping child, then stepped back and muttered under his breath, "What the hell were you two chasing out here?" 31 years later, no one had ever answered that question. The cruiser was decommissioned. Ben grew up. The case went cold. But what no one knew, not yet, was that something had been left behind, something buried. And when a rusted badge surfaced under a concrete slab in the middle of nowhere, it wasn't just a forgotten relic. It was an October 17th, 1993. Tillamook County, Oregon. The fog had come in heavy that night, rolling off the Pacific and swallowing the pine-covered hills like a blanket of silence. County Road 19, a lonely two-lane strip of cracked asphalt and gravel shoulders, wound through 30 miles of nothing. No streetlights, no houses, no reason for anyone to be out there, especially after dark. But the sheriff's cruiser sat there anyway, half hidden in the mist, headlights still burning through the haze like pale eyes refusing to blink. It was just after 11 p.m. when local farmer Denny Stokes spotted it while driving home from his sister's place. He'd nearly kept going. Thought maybe it was a busted decoy left by poachers or drug runners. But something about the shape in the back seat made him slow down. He stopped 50 feet behind the cruiser, left his engine running, and stepped out with a flashlight clutched in shaking fingers. The air was cold and wet. Every sound felt distant. The beam cut through the fog and landed on the cruiser's license plate, then the open front doors. The driver's seat was empty. So was the passenger side. The dash lights glowed faintly. The radio let out a hiss of static, broken only by soft bursts of white noise. Then he saw the small shape in the back seat, a child unmoving. He thought the worst, but as he moved closer, he realized the boy was breathing. Asleep. Alive. He opened the rear door slowly. The boy stirred, eyes fluttering open, confused but calm. He didn't cry, didn't scream, just looked at Denny like he was waking up from a dream. Wrapped around his shoulders was a thin sheriff's department blanket. His feet were bare. His pajamas were red with little fire trucks across the legs. His name, Ben Teller, was embroidered on a tag inside the collar. Within minutes, sheriff's deputies had arrived. One checked on the boy. Another walked the perimeter with a flashlight. The third stood motionless, staring into the woods like something might stare back. The car was examined first. There were no signs of forced entry. Mark Teller's badge was still clipped to the center console. His sidearm rested securely in its holster. Aaron Teller's weapon was missing. The front seats were adjusted differently, suggesting she had been driving, though the cruiser was registered under Mark's name. The backseat cam had been turned off manually. The dashcam cassette was half ejected, its tape shredded, like someone had yanked it out mid-recording. There were no prints, no hair samples, no signs of a scuffle. No notes, no witnesses, nothing. Deputy Ron Madsen, the first official on scene, knelt next to the child and asked him gently, "Ben, where are your parents?" The boy blinked sleepily. "They said they'd be right back," he murmured. "They told me not to move." That would be the last coherent sentence Ben gave that night. Everything after that dissolved into confusion. He said he remembered the smell of his mother's shampoo. He remembered hearing his father's voice. "Don't move. Stay here. We'll be right back." And then silence. But what he would later recall, only in pieces, only in fragments that came back over the years, was the rearview mirror. The moment before he fell asleep. A figure, standing in the road behind the cruiser. Not his father, not his mother, just someone, watching. When news of the disappearance broke, the town reeled. 2 decorated officers gone without a trace, and their child left behind unharmed? It didn't make sense. The tellers were well respected. Mark had been with the sheriff's office for over 10 years. A former Marine with no enemies, no disciplinary record. Aaron was known for being brilliant, calm under pressure, and deeply intuitive. Together, they'd cracked some of the toughest cases in Tillamook County. And now they were gone. The search began that same night. Helicopters, K-9 units. Volunteers combed the forest for days. The FBI was called in. Psychics offered theories. Nothing helped. There were no ransom notes. In early March of 2024, a private development firm was conducting a routine land survey just outside Tillamook's city limits. The property had been purchased for a planned eco-retreat, a quiet, forested parcel of forgotten land marked by dense underbrush, steep inclines, and an eerie silence that made even the surveyors feel unwelcome. Leo Strickland, the machine operator assigned to the job, had been clearing soil for water runoff lines when the ground gave way. The collapse was sudden, revealing a concrete slab split neatly down the middle like a cracked eggshell. Beneath it, rusted steel glinted faintly under the pale morning sun. Leo backed away and called his supervisor. Within an hour, the county sheriff's office was on site, and the full perimeter was cordoned off with bright yellow tape that whipped in the wind. Beneath the fractured slab, partially collapsed and buried under decades of soil, lay the unmistakable entrance to a Cold War-era fallout shelter. The air that drifted up from the hatch was thick, stale, metallic, and faintly sweet, like rotted plastic and old paper. No one had touched this place in years, maybe longer. Deputy Mason Coyle was the first to descend. Flashlight in hand, boots crunching against dust-covered stairs, he moved carefully. The interior was skeletal. Concrete walls, peeling paint, rusted bunk frames. Old civil defense posters curled and hung in tatters. A broken cot lay overturned. Empty water barrels lined the corners. And then something caught the light. Near the northwest drain, wedged deep in a rusted grate, was a small, corroded object. Coyle crouched, pried it loose, and brushed off the grit with gloved fingers. It was a badge, tarnished, dulled by time, but the inscription was still legible. Tillamook County Sheriff M. Teller, number 712. Everything stopped. For a moment, the only sound was the slow, echoing drip of condensation. Coyle turned the badge over carefully. There were no signs of struggle. No dried blood, no torn fabric. Just the badge, placed with intention, almost reverently, as if someone had wanted it to be found eventually. The moment it hit the evidence table back at the station, phones started ringing. Old files were reopened. Former deputies were contacted. And then one call was made that hadn't been dialed in decades. Ben Teller was teaching a criminology elective at Portland State University when he got the voicemail. At first, he let it go to audio transcript, just another unknown number. But when he saw the words, "This is Lieutenant Sarah Canby from Tillamook County," his breath caught. He hadn't heard that town's name spoken aloud in years. Not like that. Not with weight behind it. He called back. "Mr. Teller," the voice said, professional but tense. "We've uncovered a structure on private land near County Road 19. Inside, we recovered a badge, your father's badge. There's also a second item we believe you'll want to identify personally." Ben didn't ask for details. He didn't stall. He simply said, "I'll be there in 2 hours." The drive south was quiet. He didn't listen to music, didn't answer texts, didn't even look at the road signs until he crossed the old county line, where the forest grew too thick for daylight and the trees pressed inward like watchers who never left their post. It had been 31 years since his parents vanished, and now, just when he'd finally stopped rehearsing the what-ifs, something had surfaced. As he pulled up to the survey site, the first thing he saw was the coroner's van, parked in the shade, engine off. Then the forensics tent, the yellow markers, the techs in white suits moving like shadows across the slope. But it was the cold in his chest that told him. This wasn't just a forgotten relic. This was a message, and it had waited 3 decades to be heard. Ben Teller hadn't driven this road in over 2 decades. There was no reason to. Not after the cruiser. Not after the search parties stopped. Not after the headlines faded and the silence filled in every answer no one could give. He had buried it all. Carefully. Methodically. But trauma doesn't stay buried. Not when it has roots this deep. The road hadn't changed much. Same cracked asphalt, same ditch sloping off into tangled brush. The forest, if anything, had grown denser, thicker, more closed off, as if nature itself had chosen to protect what happened here. He parked behind a line of county vehicles and stepped out. The air was damp, heavy, the kind of cold that seeped through layers and settled into bone. Fog clung to the low branches, and the distant echo of a woodpecker tapped somewhere out of sight. A young officer met him near the trailhead. "Lieutenant Canby is waiting for you by the staging tent," he said. "She asked that you don't touch anything just yet." Ben nodded silently. As they walked, he saw the yellow tape stretched between pine trunks, fluttering like some forgotten ritual. The earth beneath their feet was soft, upturned in patches. Bright flags marked each step of the excavation path, like breadcrumbs. And then he saw it. The shelter's entrance, still cracked open, a rusted steel hatch caved inward from the top. The concrete perimeter was shattered. Earth had spilled inward. And in the center, where the survey team had first looked, was a small, cleared section with plastic evidence tents. Under one lay the badge. Under another, a Polaroid photo, slightly curled at the edges. Inside the tent, Lieutenant Canby stood over a folding table covered in labeled bags. She didn't look like a detective from television. No sunglasses, no swagger. Just tired eyes, steady hands, and a jaw set like concrete. "This," she said, pointing to the first bag, "is your father's badge, recovered from beneath the shelter's floor drain. No signs of force. No bending. No debris damage. It was placed, not dropped." Ben didn't speak. He couldn't. "And this," she continued, lifting the second bag, "was beside it. A photo. You, we think. Age 6. Same pajamas you were wearing the night they disappeared." Ben stared at the picture. It wasn't just that he recognized himself. It was that he didn't recognize the photo. "I've never seen this," he said quietly. "Not in any family album. Not anywhere." Canby tilted her head. "You're sure?" He nodded. "That birthday? I remember it. That cake. My dad tried to bake it over a fire pit because the oven broke. It was lopsided. Frosting melted off the sides. My mom laughed for 5 straight minutes. She exchanged a glance with the forensics tech nearby. "What?" Ben asked. The film was never developed, Canby said. We think whoever had it kept the original role. Maybe for years. It only showed up now because someone processed it recently. Maybe in the last few months. Ben felt the bottom drop out of his chest. He turned slowly and looked back out toward the trees. Beyond the yellow tape, the road disappeared around a bend. The same bend where the cruiser had once sat, idling like it was waiting for something. Or someone. Later that evening, just before dusk, Ben stood alone on the shoulder of County Road 19. No camera crew, no lights, just him, the wind, and a place that had frozen in time. He walked to the exact spot where the car had been found. He knew it without needing a marker. Some places don't let you forget. The gravel crunched beneath his shoes. The brush had grown thick around the edges, but the indentation where the tires had once rested was still faintly visible. He crouched and ran his hand across the dirt, half expecting it to be warm, like it had been back then, with the engine still running. Then he turned to face the woods. If someone had stood there that night, just beyond the tree line, they'd have seen everything. The cruiser, the boy, the direction Mark and Aaron Teller had walked before disappearing into the dark. And now Ben had returned. But something told him he wasn't the only one. The next morning, the forensic unit returned in full. Floodlights were set up along the perimeter. Extension cords ran from generators. Plastic tarps rustled in the breeze, and boot prints began to overlap across the soft earth, each one carefully catalogued. The shelter was no longer just an anomaly. It was now a crime scene. Ben stood beside Lieutenant Canby as a technician hoisted the hatch fully open. A metal groan echoed into the woods as the slab shifted back. A gust of air escaped from the darkness below, stale and cold, like a breath held for too long. Canby offered him a flashlight. "You don't have to go in," she said quietly. Ben took it anyway. The metal staircase descended in a tight spiral. Every step vibrated under his weight, metal against metal. The walls were reinforced concrete, lined with rusted pipes and emergency supply hooks. At the bottom, the space opened into a narrow corridor. His light swept left to right, catching glimpses of old posters peeling off the walls. Fallout safety tips. Rationing for survival. Be alert. Stay alive. They passed a collapsed cot. Metal shelves bent inward. Broken water jugs littered the corners. Decades of rot clung to every surface. Then came the first sign that someone had been here recently. A modern water bottle, plastic, dented, but intact. Its label dated back to 2019. Canby frowned. That's not 50 years old. They pushed deeper. Near the far end of the shelter, in a partially caved-in storage area, the forensic team had flagged two objects. The first was the badge, still sitting on a sheet of crushed concrete, marked and bagged the day before. The second had only just been found. It was a child's shoe. A sneaker, small, dirt-stained, fabric cracked with time. Its tread still visible. Ben knelt down next to the evidence bag, staring at it through the plastic. "Do you recognize it?" Canby asked. "No," he said, "but it looks recent, like early 2000s maybe." She nodded. "We think someone accessed the shelter after it was sealed, possibly more than once." He stood slowly. "You think they were keeping people down here?" "We don't know yet," she replied. "But it gets stranger." They moved to the farthest wall. A shallow indentation ran along the floor, almost invisible without light. A technician used a brush to sweep the dust aside, revealing a rusted floor drain. Wedged beneath it, found just hours before, was a notebook. It was cloth-covered, faded green, frayed at the corners. Inside the cover, written in blocky black ink, Aaron Teller. Ben's breath caught. He reached for the table beside him to steady himself. "I've seen this before," he said. "My mother carried it with her everywhere." She took notes in it, sketches, grocery lists. It was a gift from my dad on their anniversary. Canby gently placed the sealed bag containing the notebook on the table. "We haven't opened it yet," she said. "Chain of custody, preservation procedures. But preliminary scans suggest writing across multiple pages." Ben's eyes burned. "She was alive," he whispered. "At least long enough to write in it. And there's more," Canby added. "The ink on the last page was tested. We estimate the final entry was written around 2007. Ben turned sharply. "That's 14 years after she disappeared." "Possibly longer," Canby said. "Possibly less. The dating isn't exact." Ben stepped away, swallowing hard. The shelter's air felt heavier now, like it had weight, like it had absorbed every breath, every scream, every moment someone had spent inside. "What else have you found?" he asked. Canby hesitated. "We're still processing everything. But so far, there are signs this space wasn't just accessed, it was inhabited. Temporary bedding, non-expired canned food, battery packaging, traces of hair, possibly animal or human. And," she paused, "there's something else." She led him to a narrow wall space near the drain. Behind a broken metal shelf, a section of concrete had flaked away, exposing what looked like etching. A child's drawing. It was faint, done in crayon. A square room, a stick figure family, 2 adults, 1 child, all holding hands. And above them, drawn in red, a shape that might have been the sun, or maybe something else. The caption below read, in shaky letters, "He says we're the lucky ones." Ben stared at it. The lines were jagged, like a child trying to draw with trembling hands. "Someone lived here," he said, "and not just for a night." Canby nodded slowly. "We're starting to believe this wasn't just a relic of the Cold War. It may have been used long after, maybe even repurposed." Ben's hand found the old notebook again, still sealed in plastic. "My mother was here," he whispered. This was hers. She looked at him, her voice soft but firm. "Then we'll treat it that way. And we'll find out who else was." As they climbed the steps back toward daylight, Ben paused near the hatch. He turned once more toward the shadows below. His light flicked off, but the chill in his bones remained. Something was down there, and it hadn't been sleeping. Back at the temporary field station, the notebook sat under warm light, flanked by 2 forensic analysts and a preservation specialist. For hours, they'd worked to carefully dehumidify and separate the fragile pages. The paper was brittle in some places, water-stained in others. But remarkably, dozens of entries had survived. The room was quiet when they handed it to Ben. He sat at a folding table, gloved hands trembling slightly. A digital recorder ran beside him, and a fresh notepad lay ready in case he wanted to take notes. He didn't. He wasn't here to analyze. He was here to remember. The first page was written in neat, steady handwriting. October 10th, 1993. "We're inside now. Mark says to stay calm. He says this place is secure, that it was meant to protect people. But I can hear him pacing. He's not calm. I don't know who was chasing us or why the radio cut out, but we didn't imagine it. Someone was in the trees, watching, waiting." Ben paused. His mouth went dry. The timeline lined up. They disappeared on October 17th. This was just a week before. His mother had been keeping this journal in the days leading up to the night everything went silent. He flipped ahead. The writing grew sharper, more frantic. October 15th. Ben is safe. That's what matters. He thinks we're camping. He doesn't understand why he has to stay in the back seat. Mark and I take turns watching the road. The radio still isn't working. We tried the CB, but the static is worse now, like something's jamming it. Mark says we'll call for help in the morning. We'll leave the shelter then. Ben's eyes darted to the field techs. "They left him in the cruiser," he murmured. "They came here first, then went back, only to vanish." Lieutenant Canby nodded quietly from the doorway. He turned the page. October 17th, we saw it again. Same shape, same glow, just past the ridge. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't walk. It floats, and it doesn't leave tracks. We saw it from inside the hatch. Thought maybe it would pass. But it stayed, like it knew we were here. Ben blinked, the sentence burning into his skull. It floats. It doesn't leave tracks. The next entry, dated the same night, was shorter, scrawled in thick ink, shaky. "If we don't come back, if someone finds this, Ben is in the cruiser. Don't let him see this thing. Don't let it speak to him. It lies." He closed the book gently, staring into the middle distance. Canby stepped closer. "That's where we stopped. There are more pages, some damaged. But before we go further, we thought you should see this." She handed him a clear envelope. Inside, between two sheets of archival plastic, was a photograph. Polaroid. Faded. It showed a concrete wall, inside the shelter, with something scrawled in black marker. Block letters. Ben squinted. "They took our faces." "What is this?" he whispered. "It was taped to the back page of the notebook," Canby replied. "We don't know if she wrote it, or if she found it." He turned it over. A second image had been glued crudely to the back. A blurry still frame from what looked like a VHS tape. Two figures, barely distinguishable in the frame, facing the camera. Ben's stomach twisted. He recognized the woman, his mother. But the man beside her was wrong. Same uniform, same badge, same haircut as his father. But the face wasn't his. Not quite. It was too symmetrical. The eyes were sunken, almost pixelated. The smile, too wide. "They took our faces," Ben whispered again. Canby laid a new bag on the table. "We found this inside the shelter's wall cavity, buried behind a loose cinder block." Ben leaned in. Inside was a broken handheld video recorder, partially melted. The label read, "Timuck Sheriff Evidence. Tape 4D, 10/93." Was it functional? "Mostly," she said. "We salvaged 5 minutes of footage." She signaled the tech, who dimmed the lights and cued the video. The footage was grainy, warped by time. Static flickered. And then, Aaron Teller's voice. "We don't know what it wants. It doesn't eat, doesn't sleep. It mimics." Mark saw it up close. Said it wore his face like a mask. A loud crash cut through the audio. The video jerked. Flashlights swung wildly. Then a frame. A figure standing at the far end of the shelter hallway. Silent, tall, faceless. And then the screen went black. Ben sat frozen. The silence afterward felt deafening. "We ran the audio through every filter we had," the tech said. "There's a low-frequency hum underneath the whole video. Subaudible. Infrasound. Some think that kind of frequency messes with the brain." Ben slowly exhaled. This thing, whatever it was, it stalked them. It played with them. And then it replaced them. Canby didn't answer. Her face was pale, tense. "We're pulling old missing persons cases now," she finally said. "Looking for similar reports. We think this wasn't the first time." Ben closed the notebook and folded his arms over it, like shielding it might somehow bring them back. It didn't, but it confirmed one thing. His parents hadn't just vanished. They'd been erased. The next 48 hours unraveled like wire pulled from a deep well, rusted, tangled, and seemingly endless. Ben barely slept. His mind looped between the journal entries and the faceless figure in the recovered footage. The mimicry, the lies, the notebook's final warning. Don't let it speak to him. But something far worse had begun to crystallize. Not just what his parents encountered, but what had been ignored by everyone since. Lieutenant Canby's team worked through the night digitizing records from the late 20th century, many of which had never made it into the centralized system. Lost files, misfiled names, unsolved disappearances. It was there, between yellowing pages and brittle microfilm, that the pattern began to take form. The first connection came from a retired deputy named Arnold Vega. He had served in neighboring Marion County from 1985 to 1994. After Ben's story hit local media, Vega called the station, requesting to speak with the investigation team. Canby and Ben drove out to meet him in person. Vega's home was small, cluttered with newspaper stacks and police memorabilia. He was in his 80s now, slow but sharp. When they mentioned County Road 19, his expression changed. "Same damn stretch," he muttered. "We had a case in '89. 2 hikers vanished. Found their tent upright. Food half-cooked on the stove. Radio was playing. No signs of struggle." Ben leaned forward. "Did they ever find them?" "No." But 2 weeks later, someone reported seeing one of them walking near the reservoir. Only he didn't speak. Just stood there, stared at a passing car. Smiling, he pulled out a file from an old cabinet. Inside was a Polaroid of a man with shoulder-length hair, staring at the camera, expression slack. Beneath the photo was a note scribbled in red ink. His eyes didn't blink, and he wasn't wearing shoes. Canby turned the page and stopped cold. "Same handwriting," she whispered. "This note, same as the one in the shelter." Ben's pulse quickened. That night, they laid out everything they had. Photos, reports, maps, old tape fragments. And slowly, it built a picture. Disappearances spaced 4 to 6 years apart. Always in rural areas. Always involving people who were either never found or later seen again acting strangely. Silent. Off. Like mannequins in human skin. Some called it folklore, others psychosis, but the same phrases kept showing up. "It watched from the trees. They wore my brother's face. It floated. No tracks." One file, dated 1974, contained a scrawled diagram of a concrete shelter layout almost identical to the one Ben had entered. It was drawn by a boy named Adrian Hurst, 11 years old. He had survived a car accident near a remote mountain trail. The search party found him 2 days later, alone, mumbling something over and over again. "It tried to sound like my mom." Ben felt like he was suffocating. "I think it lives underground," he said aloud. Canby looked up. "Think about it," he continued. "Why the shelters? Why mimicry? It needs places we forget. Abandoned structures. Remote woods. It doesn't just take people. It studies them. Where's them?" She nodded slowly. "You think it's still here?" Ben didn't answer. He didn't need to, because in the last known photo of his father, taken 3 days before the disappearance, a shape appeared in the background, barely visible. A pale figure standing just inside the tree line. Faceless. Watching. It was the technician from Evidence who called him in, just past midnight. "We missed something," she said. "You'll want to see this yourself." Ben returned to the shelter. The entry hatch groaned again as they pulled it back under the glare of halogen lamps. The stairs were familiar now, less claustrophobic, but as he descended, a strange pressure built in his chest, like he was going somewhere he was never meant to return to. The technician led him toward the back wall, the same place the child's drawing had been found. Only this time, they'd begun removing the collapsed shelving and broken conduit. Behind the mess was a low cavity, maybe a foot deep, carved behind a dislodged cinder block. Inside it, they found a locked tin box. She handed it to him carefully, gloves on. It was military green, scuffed, hinges rusted, but intact. The initials MT were etched on the bottom. His father's initials. Ben didn't speak. He took it from her hands and walked toward the central table. It took nearly 20 minutes to pick the rusted lock. Inside, 3 things: a cassette tape, a sealed envelope, and a child's toy, a tiny red plastic firetruck, missing 1 wheel. Ben stared at it, throat tightening. "That was mine," he whispered. "It was in the back seat that night." He reached for the envelope. On the front, in block letters, it simply read, "For Ben. When you're old enough to understand." His hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. "Ben, if you're reading this, we didn't make it back. But you did. And that's what matters. We knew something was following us. At first, we thought it was a man, maybe someone from a drug bust or a vendetta. But it wasn't. It didn't breathe. It didn't move like anything alive. It could be anyone at all. We stayed underground as long as we could, but it found us. Or maybe it was never far behind. Your mother and I left clues. That notebook, the badge. We hoped someone would put the pieces together. But if it's you who found this, then maybe you were always meant to. Don't follow it, Ben. Don't talk to it. It will wear our faces. It will sound like us. It will promise things. You must not listen. We love you. And we tried. God, we tried. Be better than us. Get out. And whatever you do, don't bring it back with you." Dad Ben stared at the words, barely breathing. Tears blurred the paper. His mind screamed for stillness, but inside, everything reeled. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was a warning. He picked up the cassette tape. "Where'd you find a player?" he asked the tech. She gestured behind her. "We rigged an old Walkman with batteries. It still runs." He inserted the tape. Pressed play. A click. Then static. Then his mother's voice. "Ben, baby, if you ever hear this, I hope you remember the sound of me. This is me. This is your mom. Not anything else." A pause. Then breathing. "We kept the hatch closed for 4 days. No signal. No food left. Your father left yesterday morning. Said he saw movement on the ridge. I haven't seen him since." Ben swallowed hard. "If I don't come back up, baby, please don't look for us. Let the dark things die in the dark." Click. Tape ends. He sat motionless for a long time. Then something strange occurred to him. "Who opened the box?" he asked suddenly. The tech blinked. "You did. Just now." "No. I mean before me. The lock was rusted, sure, but the tape still plays. The envelope's clean. That truck, it was lost in the cruiser. So how did it end up here?" Canby appeared in the doorway, eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this wasn't sealed for 30 years. I'm saying someone's been down here again. Recently." She looked around. "We swept it 3 times. Then sweep it again." He stood, walked toward the corridor, past the child's drawing, past the bunk. At the far end, under the emergency hatch, he stopped, because the wall was wet. Not just damp from humidity, but freshly wet. A trail of moisture, thin and vertical, had begun to seep from between the concrete panels, as if something behind it was breathing. The shelter was sealed the next morning. Steel plating, welded shut. Local authorities marked it as hazardous and closed off the entire perimeter. Officially, the reason was structural instability. Unofficially, no one argued with the decision. Ben didn't protest either. In fact, he left to muck the same day. He needed air, space, distance, but none of it helped, because wherever he went, he felt watched. Back in Portland, his apartment felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that hummed under the walls. He'd unplug the radio, the microwave, even the fridge. Still, the hum remained. That first night back, he dreamed of the shelter. He saw his father's face, only it wasn't quite right. Too smooth, too symmetrical. When it smiled, it didn't blink. When it spoke, it used his voice. A perfect copy, but somehow hollow. Ben woke up sweating, chest tight, air thick with something he couldn't name. He checked the doors, the windows, all locked, and then he saw it. A photo on his bookshelf, taken when he was 7. His parents in uniform, all smiles. He was between them, face painted for Halloween. He hadn't touched the photo in years. But now, it had changed. His father's eyes were gone. Not scratched, not smudged, just blank. Smooth skin where pupils should have been. Ben dropped the frame. The glass cracked. He didn't sleep the next night, or the one after. By the third day, he noticed something stranger. People in his building greeted him, using his name. Before he introduced himself, a neighbor he'd never met waved and said, "Morning, Ben. That conference in Timuck go all right?" He froze. He never told her where he went. When he asked how she knew, she blinked. "Didn't you tell me?" "The night you got back." He hadn't. He hadn't seen her at all. That night, he set up a camera in his living room, left it recording overnight. In the morning, he opened the footage. There, around 2:17 a.m., the front door clicked open. Ben never stirred. The bed was visible in the background. But a second Ben walked in. Same clothes, same hair, moved slower, turned toward the camera, smiled, and then stared for 12 full minutes, never blinking, just watching. At 2:29, it walked into the bedroom, where the real Ben lay asleep. The footage ended. Ben sat still. Cold sweat soaked his back. His breath shallow. His reflection in the monitor flickered, then smiled. Ben tried to tell someone. He brought the footage to a private investigator, an old colleague of his father's from decades ago. The man agreed to meet in a diner on the outskirts of the city. They watched the video together on a laptop, sipping cold coffee as the static rolled. When it finished, the investigator sat silently for a moment. Then he said, "That's not you." Ben nodded. The man leaned in. "Where's the tape now?" "At home." "Hidden." "Destroy it." Ben hesitated. "Why?" The investigator glanced around the diner. "Because it's bait. It wants to be seen. And now that I've seen it." He didn't finish. They parted without shaking hands. That night, Ben went home, pulled the hard drive from the recorder, smashed it into pieces, and burned the remains in a steel drum on his balcony. But it didn't matter, because something had already taken root. He saw it in the corners of mirrors, his face flickering, out of sync. He heard it in voicemail recordings, where his voice echoed back words he never said. One night, he received an email from his father's old account. The subject line was blank. The body read, "Nice place you've got. I miss your voice." He shut off the internet, canceled his phone, moved to a new apartment. But the thing didn't care about walls or signals. It was in him now, or around him. He wasn't sure. Weeks passed. He stopped trying to explain. People don't listen when the monster wears your smile. Eventually, Ben vanished too. Not in a dramatic way. No police report. No final message, just a life, slowly hollowed out. Neighbors said he became distant, quiet, started talking to someone no one else could see. One day, his mail stacked up. His door was locked from the inside. The lights were off, but someone was still inside, because at night, people in the building swore they saw a figure standing at his window. A man, staring down at the street. Smiling, never blinking.